And welcome back once again to Capital Tonight. More than half of New Yorkers are ready to roll the dice on allowing non-Indian casinos in New York. However, they are not completely sold on the idea of allowing mixed martial arts as a new revenue source. Those are just some of the findings of a new Siena Research Institute poll. It was released today. The poll focused on sports and gaming. There's even some baseball in there, too. The results, however, do include some interesting trends about legislative issues. Here to explain more is Siena poll director Don Levy. It is good to see you.
Great to be here, Liz. Thanks.
This is sort of like a sports catch-all,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
We're going to skip over most of the baseball stuff because I think some people are still in mourning, and I don't want anyone to get upset. More upset than they might be with the policy stuff. Let's start with gambling. Are you surprised?
I'm not surprised at this point. I mean, this is an issue that has just shot to the top of the charts very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And recent polling by some of our friends in the business pointed to this sort of finding. So we thought we'd take a look at it. And the way we did it was a little bit different. First off, we started with 4 questions, attitudes that people have about non-Indian casino gambling. And we offered those 4 statements. We'll cover those. And then after allowing people to think about those 4 different opinions, then we asked whether they supported or opposed the constitutional amendment that, as you know, would be the next major step. So we asked people the jobs question. Do you think that, do you agree or disagree that casino gambling is going to create necessary jobs here in the state of New York? Well, jobs is a magic word right now. Nearly 80% of New Yorkers said absolutely. How about revenue? Do you think that casino gambling is going to yield revenue that the state needs, the local governments need? Slightly less, but still 71%. So you have those 2 really important ingredients going for it, jobs and revenue. Then, of course, we said, isn't it possible that we already have enough outlets for gambling in the state? And interestingly, slightly over 50% of New Yorkers agreed with that. They said yes. And then the one that a lot of people will focus on, do you agree or disagree that casino gambling is going to cause, new casinos are going to cause societal problems? We're going to have crime, we're going to have compulsive gambling. 54% agreed with that. So there is some ambivalence here.
I guess so, yeah. I mean, look, I think that today the reality of gambling is that it's not just gambling anymore, right? I mean, it is a large-scale, multi-use experience. I mean, I'm thinking about Vegas, where you have just huge shows, et cetera. But even in New York, at some of the Indian gaming facilities, you have other things that are going on. You have the all-that-you-can-eat buffet, you have the shows, you have the music, you have the golf if you're going to a resort with some of them. And I'm thinking of Connecticut, actually, but I'm not sure necessarily that it's just cards or dice or whatever it is that people think in their head when you say the word gambling, right?
So when you take a look, then, of course, all right, so then we asked, do you support or oppose the amendment? And we got a very large majority, 57% said, yes, I would support it, only 36% would oppose. Now, if you look at just the people who agreed with the societal problem issue, the idea that this is decaying society, moral decay, it's going to lead to crime, compulsive gambling, the people who agree with that, we still find that nearly half, 40% of those people support the casino. So perhaps they're feeding into this idea that it is more. It's entertainment. It's more than just gambling.
Yeah. And actually, so we should just remind viewers that there is no amendment at this point, that the Cuomo administration has said it's taking a look at everything, and that the governor is actually going to have an idea of where he wants to go, a proposal by January, which is when the next legislative session starts. So we shall see. It is something, obviously, that we're keeping a thumb on, because it is, as you noted, all about jobs and revenue, which is why the MMA thing is so surprising, because the supporters of mixed martial arts who we've had on this show have said this is a huge revenue boon. We've made changes in the sport and it's safe. It's actually going to bring a lot of money to the state. You should legalize it. Other states around us, which is another of the gambling argument, because Massachusetts is going through this right now too, you should do this, right? And yet New Yorkers say no. Why?
New Yorkers seem to draw a wall and differentiate. Some of it has a little something to do, I think, with age. What we found with MMA is that overwhelmingly young New Yorkers, 18 to 34, 60% of those people side with the supporters of MMA. Who's opposed to MMA and who's opposed big is older New Yorkers, most especially 65 plus, but even in the 50 to 65 category, very, very strong opposition. So the end result is that MMA goes down, at least in this poll, by 9 points and actually fared a little bit less well in this poll than when we asked the identical question just 4 months ago.
You're actually asking, the way that you set it up is pretty interesting. You say, do you support either or oppose either one of these statements, right? One is that it will generate fan interest revenues and would be an engine for economic development. That's what the supporters say. Or opponents say it's dangerous and even barbaric, and we shouldn't allow such a violent sport to be practiced here. That's a pretty clear cut, right? That's pretty clear cut. The interesting thing about it, and we discussed this before we actually came on the air, is that boxing is just as violent, one might argue. Doesn't have the opportunity for you to what's called tap out, which is what MMA offers you. And we've seen the long-term effects on people like Muhammad Ali, for example, and yet a lot of the same folks who are the older generation think boxing is just fine, and they don't think MMA is okay.
Certainly it might be a little bit of what are you used to? We know that gambling, I think, casino gambling gets a boost because gambling is an issue, is a behavior, is a set of circumstances that people have become used to. When we ask people, have you gambled? Have you been to the racetrack? Have you ever bet on a sports game? 40 to 50% of New Yorkers readily say absolutely. So it's something they're used to. And older New Yorkers, the New Yorkers who, as you know, are the ones who are turning out to the polls to vote, are very, very used to gambling and may very well at some point have visited Atlantic City, have visited Foxwoods or Mohegan Sun and say, why not New York? Older voters, the ones who are most opposed to MMA, apparently they're unfamiliar with the sport, with the activity.
Well, and I'm not so sure necessarily that it would help the cause of MMA supporters if these people were familiar, because you're talking about a match that takes place in a cage.
Yes.
And that's different than a match that takes place in a ring, plus there's kicking. I think that it is probably an issue of familiarity. I agree. I'm just, I'm surprised that the numbers are so dramatically different than for gambling, because all of this tends to be something that we generally consider vice.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the revenue issue is interesting also because, and we didn't probe this, I think maybe it could deserve a little bit more study. People may very well view casino gambling as a everyday revenue stream. Those casinos are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. MMA might be, although it's billed as a revenue stream and a much needed revenue stream for some of the arenas that we have in New York, still I don't know if people are thinking of that as the type of revenue stream that's going to generate money each and every day. It's going to generate money and jobs on a more sporadic basis.
Yeah, I also would suspect that, you know, part of the reason why we have seen it die in the legislature, and I know the MMA supporters suspect something else that has to do with organized labor, but definitely when you see these kind of numbers and you know that people who are over a certain age tend to vote and people who are under a certain age tend not to vote, I think that you can understand why lawmakers feel pretty safe in saying no to this particular revenue stream. I just want to let viewers know that if you're interested in determining who the favorite baseball team is of New Yorkers, you should go and check it out. I'm not going to tell you. It is it's a surprise. You could go to www.siena.edu/SRI/research. Is that correct?
Yes.
You can go to the Siena website and you can find your way there. It's a pretty interesting poll. Don Levy, thank you very much.
Pleasure to be with you.